I saw my wife with another man broadcast live during a Coldplay concert. After that I didn't break up with her nor divorced her. From that moment, each day became a calculated step in my revenge, until it all erupted in one unforgettable, explosive finale. Before continue, please like this video and subscribe to my channel. That's free and only way to support us. Thank you. My name is Daniel. I'm 33 years old, and for most of my adult life, I thought I had a decent grasp on love. I wasn't expecting fireworks every day, but I believed marriage was like a favorite song. Maybe the lyrics fade over time, maybe you skip a verse now and then, but the tune stays yours. Turns out, mine had been remixed without my permission. It was a slow, rainy Sunday evening. One of those nights where the air feels heavy and even the couch seems to sigh when you sit down. I was wrapped in my old fleece blanket, the one that smelled faintly of buttered popcorn and the ghost of past Netflix binges. I was flicking through channels, half expecting to land on some late-night cooking show that would make me regret skipping dinner. Then Coldplay's live concert appeared on the screen. The stadium lights, the roar of the crowd, the kind of energy you could feel through the TV. I wasn't the world's biggest fan, but Mia, my wife, adored them. She'd once cried during Fix You in the car, and I teased her about it for weeks. I thought, maybe I'd watch for a bit and later brag about seeing it before she did. The crowd camera swept across the front rows, and that's when the air in the room shifted. My breath caught, my eyes locked in. There, framed in perfect high definition, was Mia. My wife. My till death do us part partner. She was glowing, not the kind of glow you get from good lighting, but the kind that comes from being exactly where you want to be. Only, she wasn't alone. Next to her was a man I'd never seen before. Tall, smug, with a jawline that looked like it had been carved to annoy me. His hand rested casually on her hip, like he owned stock in her. And then, like some sick twist in a music video, she leaned toward him. He leaned toward her. Their lips met. Right there. On national television. While Yellow played in the background, as if the universe had decided to provide the perfect soundtrack to my humiliation. I didn't shout. I didn't throw the remote. I didn't even blink for a moment. My mind was scrambling, trying to file this under some category that made sense: mistaken identity, camera trick, maybe an evil twin I'd never been told about. But there was no mistaking the way her fingers curled into his shirt like she'd done with mine. It wasn't just betrayal. It was betrayal broadcasted in HD, with great lighting and surround sound. Something inside me went very still. Not the kind of stillness that comes from calm, but the dangerous kind, the silence before a storm. If she thought she could walk back into our home and spin this as just a friend or a misunderstanding, she clearly didn't know who she married. This wasn't going to end with a tearful talk. No, this was going to end with something she'd never forge. I didn't turn the TV off. I just sat there, staring at the screen long after the camera cut away from Mia and Mr. Smug Jawline. The music kept playing, the crowd kept cheering, but all I could hear was a kind of static in my head. It was like my brain was trying to reboot, but kept hitting an error. My hands were still under the blanket, clenched so tightly my nails dug little half-moons into my palms. I remember glancing down and noticing a piece of popcorn stuck to my shirt from earlier, like the last survivor of a happier time. I flicked it away, and that tiny motion felt absurdly significant, as if I was throwing away the last shred of normal in my life. The rain outside kept tapping against the window, slow and steady, like it was mocking me for sitting there in silence. I thought about calling her right then. I imagined what she'd say. Something bland, probably. She was a professional at sounding innocent, the kind of person who could hide a dead body and still convince the police she was a victim. But calling her wasn't going to get me the truth. She'd spin a story faster than a DJ at a wedding. No, I needed something stronger than confrontation. I needed confirmation. Proof. Because while my gut was screaming, she's cheating, my brain wanted hard evidence. I opened her Instagram on my phone. Nothing suspicious, just the same filtered coffee shots, a selfie with our cat, and a quote about trust being the foundation of love. Oh, the irony. Then I remembered something. Mia wasn't supposed to be at a concert tonight. She told me she was meeting an old college friend for dinner, just a girls' night. I'd even offered to drop her off, but she said no, claiming she didn't want me to wait around in the rain. At the time, I'd thought she was being considerate. Now it felt like she'd just been making sure I wasn't anywhere near the crime scene. I rewound the live stream. Pause. Zoomed in. It was her, no question. The silver necklace I'd bought her for our anniversary, the one she said she'd never take off, was catching the stadium light. Something hot and steady began to pool in my chest. Not sadness. Not even anger yet. Just Fuel. I wasn't going to scream at her. I wasn't going to cry or beg for an explanation. I was going to play along. Let her think she'd gotten away with it. And then, when the time was right, I'd pull the rug out so hard she'd wonder if she'd ever been standing on it at all. That night, as the concert ended and the credits rolled, I made myself a promise. I wouldn't just end this marriage. I'd end her comfort, her control, her perfect little image. Slowly first. Then all at once. And she'd never see it coming. The hardest part about revenge isn't the planning, it's the pretending. Waking up next to someone who doesn't know you've seen the mask slip. Smiling at them without letting the smile curl into something sharp. It's like sitting across from a chess opponent, knowing exactly how you're going to checkmate them, but moving your pawns slow enough that they think they still have a chance. Mia came home the next morning looking like someone who had stayed out way too late but wanted to pretend they hadn't. She dropped her bag on the counter and mumbled something about traffic. I asked how her girls' night was, and she launched into some half-baked story about laughter, old memories, and a waiter who looked like Zac Efron. I nodded, even laughed at the right parts. If she noticed the way I was studying her, she didn't let on. I didn't bring up the concert. Not a single word. If she expected an ambush, she'd have to wait for it like a bad season finale. Instead, I made coffee, slid a cup toward her, and talked about the weather, the news, anything that wasn't the fact that I'd seen her swapping saliva with Mr. Smug on live TV. But behind that calm, my mind was clocking every detail. Her phone buzzed twice on the counter, and she flipped it over without looking. Her hand trembled, barely, but enough for me to notice. She took longer than usual to sip her coffee, as if buying herself time. And when she smiled at me, it didn't reach her eyes. That was fine. I didn't need her honesty. I needed her comfort zone to stay intact, for now. That day, while she was at work, I started building my quiet arsenal. I went through old bank statements, piecing together spending patterns. She'd made a couple of unexplained purchases in the past month, 2 expensive dinners, a hotel booking she'd later canceled but never refunded. My stomach tightened, but I kept scrolling. Then came the social media breadcrumbs. She wasn't dumb enough to post anything incriminating, but her college friend had tagged a photo the night before, a group shot at a bar, but Mia wasn't in it. Which meant she'd lied twice. I saved everything, screenshots, receipts, timestamped. My laptop became a vault. I even created a hidden folder with a name boring enough that no one would ever click it. Tax Documents 2015. And still, I acted normal. We cooked dinner together. We watched a sitcom. I even kissed her goodnight. She probably thought she'd gotten away with it. But as she slept beside me, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying the moment on TV where her lips met his. Not with hurt anymore, but with precision, like an architect mentally drawing the blueprint for a building they're about to demolish. She'd handed me the matches. Now all I had to do was wait for the right night to strike them. The trick with psychological revenge is to make it feel like a draft in the room, something you can't see, but you swear you can feel. I didn't want to confront Mia yet. I wanted her to wonder if she'd left a door open. It started small. I changed little routines. If she came home late, I didn't ask where she'd been, I just looked up from whatever I was doing and smiled. Not the warm kind, the kind you give when you know something the other person doesn't. Then I'd go back to my book, leaving her hanging in silence. She'd ask about my day, and I'd tell her it was productive without elaborating. Sometimes I'd hum Coldplay songs under my breath while washing dishes, the exact songs they'd played at that concert. Her shoulders would tense every time, like she'd just tasted something sour. At night, I started staying up later than her. I'd wait until she was asleep, then step outside for a few minutes and come back in quietly. I didn't do anything suspicious, but the next morning she'd ask where I'd been. I'd shrug and say, "Just clearing my head." She'd nod, but I could see the questions forming behind her eyes. One night, I casually mentioned that I'd been thinking about making some changes. I didn't explain what kind. Her fork froze halfway to her mouth. Then she laughed too quickly and asked if I meant the living room furniture. I smiled and said nothing. The more uneasy she became, the more I pressed in with invisible pressure. I stopped sharing details about my schedule. If I got a call, I'd step into another room. When she asked who it was, I'd just say, "Wrong number." Every little omission was like a tiny crack in the glass, spreading under the surface. Meanwhile, I kept digging. I found out who Mr. Smug Jawline was, a guy named Derek, some corporate event manager she'd met through a friend of a friend. His LinkedIn photo looked like he practiced smirking in the mirror. A little online digging told me more than I needed to know: where he worked, his gym, Even the fact that he was on a committee planning a big charity gala in 3 months. That was important. That was a date I tucked away in my mind. By the end of the second week, Mia was jumpier. She checked her phone more often, but also flipped it over faster when I was around. She laughed at my jokes a little too hard, as if trying to measure if we were okay. She even started bringing home my favorite snacks, unprompted. She didn't know it yet, but the game had already started. And in games like this, the loser is always the one who thinks they're still winning. By week 3, I'd stopped thinking of it as catching her cheating, and started thinking of it as the opening scene of a long, satisfying movie where I'm the director. Every good director knows you don't throw the big explosion in the first act. You plant the explosives early and let the audience sweat until the end. I started planting landmines. Not the loud, obvious kind, the ones that sit under the surface waiting for the perfect step. The first was in her social circle. I, accidentally, ran into one of her close friends at a coffee shop. We chatted, nothing serious, until I casually mentioned, "Mia's been working so hard lately. I hope she's not overdoing it with all these late nights." I didn't accuse. I didn't hint at anything specific. But I left just enough room for her friend to fill in the blank. Gossip spreads faster than Wi-Fi. The second landmine was at her work. I sent her flowers, anonymously. I knew she'd think it was from Derek. She came home with the bouquet, eyes darting like a thief in a jewelry store. When I asked who they were from, she stammered something about a client appreciation gesture. I didn't press. I just looked at them for a beat too long, then went back to my laptop. Third, I started rearranging little things at home. Her perfume bottle slightly moved, her favorite sweater folded differently, her toothbrush replaced with a new one of the same brand. Nothing that screamed break-in, just enough to make her wonder if she was losing track of details. All the while, I was keeping tabs on Derek. Through some light digital stalking, and by light I mean full-scale recon, I learned that his company was donating heavily to that charity gala. It wasn't just any event, it would be covered by local TV, live-streamed, full of their mutual friends. Perfect stage lighting for the final act. The more I planned, the calmer I became. There was a strange peace in knowing exactly how the ending would go, while she bumbled through her days thinking the plot was still under her control. One night, as she scrolled through her phone on the couch, I glanced over at her, wondering if she could feel the countdown ticking. Probably not. People rarely notice the fuse until it's already too short to put out. And mine was burning perfectly. It happened over dinner. Nothing fancy, just pasta, a bottle of wine, and the hum of rain outside. I'd been keeping things light all evening, making her laugh about something ridiculous I'd seen on TV. Then, halfway through twirling her fork, she froze. "Are you okay?" I asked, all concern in my voice, though inside I was leaning forward like a man watching the first domino fall. She nodded too quickly. Her eyes flicked to me, then down to her plate. She'd been doing that a lot lately, glancing at me as if she was checking whether I was still safe to talk to. I took a sip of wine, set the glass down, and said nothing. Silence is a scalpel in situations like this. It makes people cut themselves open. And sure enough, she started feeling it. Work stress. Tiredness. Just a lot on my mind. The usual filler phrases people use when they're trying to dam up a flood. I let her ramble, then switched topics mid-sentence, asking if she wanted dessert. The shift seemed to throw her off balance. That night, I caught her scrolling through her phone in the bathroom. When she came out, she'd locked the screen so fast she almost dropped it. I didn't say a word, just handed her the charger like nothing was unusual. The next morning, she started asking me questions she'd never cared about before. "Who were you texting last night? You were out late yesterday, where'd you go?" I gave her vague, unbothered answers. Sometimes I'd throw in something slightly offbeat like, "Oh, just running into an old friend," and leave it hanging there, no details. The look in her eyes told me she hated that. Meanwhile, my file on her and Derek kept growing. Photos, dates, times. I even had a short clip from a mutual acquaintance's Instagram story, the two of them at a rooftop bar, leaning in close, his hand brushing hers. The post had been deleted, but not before I saved it. The real shift came a week later. She walked into the living room while I was working on my laptop. The screen was blank, but I pretended to be closing something quickly. Her eyes darted to the screen, then to my face. For the first time I saw it, the flinch. The tiny, involuntary recoil of someone who knows there might be a trap but can't see it yet. And that's when I knew she was starting to feel it. The ground wasn't steady anymore. The air around her was shifting, and she couldn't tell where the wind was coming from. Exactly as planned. By now, Mia was living like someone walking across thin ice. Every step was careful, every word weighed. and all I had to do was occasionally tap the ice with a stick to remind her it could crack at any moment. The first tap came at brunch with some friends. The conversation was light, nothing serious, when one of them mentioned Coldplay's tour. I didn't even look up from my coffee. I just said, "Yeah, I saw a bit of it on TV. Front row looked amazing." I didn't name her. I didn't need to. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw her hand tighten around her fork. She kept eating, but her smile was a shade too stiff. No one else noticed, but I did. A few days later, I left my laptop open on the dining table while I made coffee. On the screen was a single folder titled Event Photos. Inside? Harmless pictures from a work function. But she didn't know that. I caught her peeking when she thought I wasn't looking, the way a kid checks the cookie jar even after they've been told not to. The best move, though, came from pure coincidence. I was talking with an acquaintance who happened to work at the same venue where that Coldplay concert was held. Casually, I asked if they'd seen the live stream. They said yes, and without missing a beat added, "Man, they kept panning to that couple in the front row. They were all over each other." I didn't react, but Mia must have overheard from the kitchen, because she dropped a spoon in the sink hard enough to make it clang. She was unraveling in small ways now. Forgetting where she left her keys. Snapping at little things. Waking up in the middle of the night and scrolling through her phone under the covers. The more she tried to act normal, the more it looked like acting. Meanwhile, my plan for the final act was taking shape. The charity gala Derek was co-hosting was in just over a month. I'd secured an invitation through a mutual contact. The event was formal, cameras everywhere, and full of the exact people Mia cared about impressing. Perfect stage for her curtain call. All I had to do was keep her walking across that ice. Until it gave way under her feet in front of the whole crowd. The gala was a month away, but in my head it was already opening night. Every detail mattered now. The timing, the audience, the props, and the star of the show, Mia, had no idea she'd been cast in the lead role of her own downfall. Getting into the event wasn't hard. I knew someone on the organizing committee, a woman who owed me a favor from years back. One polite message later, I had a ticket, not just general entry, but a seat close to the stage. Cameras would sweep that area all night. I didn't tell Mia about it. Instead, I casually mentioned that I'd be busy that evening for work-related reasons. She nodded, distracted, probably assuming I'd be holed up with spreadsheets or whatever excuse she thought fit. The beauty of it was that she and Derek would be there together, parading around like the golden couple of the night. In the meantime, I made sure the cracks in her comm kept widening. I dropped subtle references to things only Derek would know, watching her eyes flicker in confusion. I'd leave the TV on Coldplay music videos when I went to take a shower. I even changed my phone's lock screen to a still image from the concert, a wide shot, grainy, but just clear enough that you could see two people in the front row leaning toward each other. She didn't mention it, but I saw the way her gaze lingered on it whenever I set my phone down. Privately, I started working on my trump card, a short video compilation of every piece of evidence I had. Screenshot, bank statements, the rooftop bar clip, and, of course, that perfect shot from the live concert. Edited together with just enough pacing to tell the whole story without me having to say a single word. I saved it on a secure drive with a backup online. By the time the week of the gala arrived, Mia was jittery. She'd become extra careful with her schedule, her phone, even her tone of voice with me. But there was something else in her eyes, a flicker of relief. She thought she'd kept me in the dark. That was the best part. Letting her believe she'd won. The night of the gala, she left in a silver dress I'd never seen before. It glittered under the hallway light, and I could almost imagine the headlines she thought she'd make that night. I told her she looked stunning. She smiled, real, proud, confident. Perfect. That was exactly how I wanted her to feel before the lights came on. The ballroom looked like money had been poured into it by the bucket. Crystal chandeliers, champagne towers, and that faint hum of polite laughter that always floats above rich people in expensive shoes. The kind of place where secrets don't disappear, they just wait for the right lighting. I arrived early enough to blend in but late enough to avoid unnecessary small talk. My seat was exactly where I wanted it, close enough to the stage to feel the heat of the spotlights, far enough to see the whole crowd. When Mia and Derek walked in, they were impossible to miss. She was glowing, all teeth and confidence, with her arm looped through his like she was clinging to the main prize at a carnival. Derek wore a smug grin that made me want to fast forward to his part of the downfall. I watched them work the room. She was in her element, shaking hands, laughing too loudly, tossing her hair like she was in a shampoo ad. I could almost hear the voice in her head saying, "Look at me now." What she didn't see was the AV technician I'd spoken to earlier that day. The man was a friend of my committee contact, and I'd slipped him a flash drive with very specific instructions. I didn't need him to understand the backstory, just to know the exact moment to press play. Halfway through the evening, Derek took the stage to introduce the charity's keynote speaker. Cameras panned over the audience for reaction shots, and that's when I caught her scanning the room. Her eyes stopped on me. For the first time all night, her smile faltered. Not enough for anyone else to notice, just enough for me to see the flicker of unease. I raised my glass to her. Slow, deliberate. She blinked, turned back toward the stage, and sat a little straighter, as if correcting her posture could fix whatever she'd just felt in her stomach. The speeches went on, the room buzzing with polite applause and clinking glasses. My pulse stayed steady. This wasn't anger anymore. This was precision, a surgeon waiting for the perfect second to make the cut. And when it came, it would be in front of everyone. The lights dimmed for the closing presentation. The giant screen behind the stage flickered to life, showing a montage of the charity's work over the past year, smiling children, construction projects, ribbon cuttings. The crowd watched politely, sipping their champagne. Then, right on cue, the feed shifted. It began with the wide crowd shot from the Coldplay concert, stadium lights blazing, music in the background. The camera zoomed slowly toward the front row. My heart didn't race. My breathing didn't change. I'd already lived this moment 100 times in my head. There she was, Mia. Laughing, leaning in. And then, the kiss. The perfect, undeniable, high-definition proof. Gasps rippled through the ballroom like a wave hitting a shoreline. The montage didn't stop there. A quick cut to the rooftop bar video, Derek's hand brushing hers. Screenshots of text confirmations for those cancelled hotel bookings. The silver necklace catching the light at every angle. And finally, the concert still, frozen on that moment where her lips met his, framed by the glow of the stage. No narration, no captions. Just the evidence, one after the other, until there was nothing left to deny. When the screen went black, the silence was heavy. Even the sound of champagne bubbles seemed loud. I didn't look at Derek. I didn't need to. I kept my eyes on Mia. She sat frozen, her face draining of color, the confidence she'd worn like armor now in shreds at her feet. She glanced around the room, probably searching for an escape, but the walls had closed in. Everyone had seen it. Everyone knew. I stood up slowly, straightened my jacket, and walked out without a word. The hush followed me to the door, the kind of quiet that comes when a storm has just ripped through and everyone is still counting the damage. Outside, the night air felt clean in my lungs. The street lights glowed like they knew a secret. Behind me, the gala would keep going, but for Mia, the evening was over. So was her comfort. So was the life she thought she could keep both of us in. Revenge isn't always about shouting or slamming doors. Sometimes it's about holding up a mirror in front of the whole world and letting someone see exactly what they are. And that night, under the brightest lights she'd ever been in, Mia saw herself for the first time. Please like this video and subscribe to my channel. That's free and only way to support us. Thank you.